One of the most important fantasy football takeaways from the divisional playoff games, it's time to break it down right here, right now, as we begin another week of Locked On Fantasy Football.
Our Locked On Fantasy, your daily NFL fantasy podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Greetings, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Locked On Fantasy Football Podcast. As usual, I'm your host, Vinnie Iyer, and I'm not doing this. I'm writing about NFL and fantasy football for SportingNews.com. It was an exciting weekend of NFL action in the divisional playoff round, the 4 games. Not a lot of offense, as much as we expected. We didn't get the shootouts we wanted. One team really came through, but certain players didn't come through. So interesting way the matchups kind of unfolded there, starting with the Chiefs and Jaguars on Saturday, and then continuing with the Eagles-Giants, and then getting into the Bengals-Bills, and then closing with the Cowboys-49ers. So defense started to show up a little bit. The running games also became a little bit more prevalent, but congratulations to the Chiefs, Eagles, Bengals, and 49ers. They're advancing to the championship game weekend. So 3 of the same 4 teams from last year, except the Eagles are swapping out for the Rams there. So exciting action still to come here. 2 more games, one in the AFC, one in the NFC. Of course, Super Bowl is around the corner. So it'll be interesting to see who advances there. But we do need to talk about all the teams that played. So we'll break down the games for you. So we'll start on looking at the Saturday games, then give each of the Sunday marquee games a segment here on the show. So takeaways there, then we'll flip and look at the NFC and AFC news and notes that you need to know they're coming out of the end of the season through the playoffs for all the teams. So we'll cover all the teams for you on the Tuesday and Wednesday show. Then we'll come back, start breaking down the championship matchups for you, the Chiefs and Bengals and the Eagles and 49ers later in the week. So that's setting the table for the week on Locked On Fantasy Football. This episode of Locked On Fantasy Football is brought to you by PrizePicks. PrizePicks is daily fantasy made easy. Pick 2 to 6 players and they score more or less than their PrizePicks projecting. You win up to 10 times your money on your entry. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with the promo code Locked On. That's PrizePicks.com, promo code Locked On. We'll have our PrizePicks picks of the week. It was a little bit of a tough week this past week. A lot of lower totals there that we saw from the offenses, but we will look to rebound here in the divisional playoffs now being over and going into the conference championship weekend. But it's fun to play PrizePicks. You should check it out and have some success there. And again, we'll give you the advice there on Friday's show when we look at DFS, your Locked On Fantasy Football. All right, thanks again for making Locked On Fantasy Football your first listen today. We're free and available to you on all platforms. Let's dive right into the first game. The Chiefs beat the Jaguars. They hold on there to win by a touchdown, 27-20. It wasn't pretty for the Chiefs offensively. 2 guys stood out really for Patrick Mahomes and really helped him out. Travis Kelce, 17 targets in the game. He catches 14, so he comes 1 catch shy of tying James White and Darren Sproles for single game catches in a playoff game. So 14 receptions for him, but only 98 yards and 2 TDs. So the short passing game, the running game, that was the emphasis here. They were taking away the deep ball from Patrick Mahomes. What did he do? He kept working Kelce as the Jaguars had no answers in the short area of coverage for the elite Hall of Fame future tight end for the Chiefs. He was on fire this one. So Kelce really came through. It wasn't easy for Mahomes. He couldn't get to 200 yards passing in this one, but he didn't need to with Travis Kelce kind of being an extension of the running game. They didn't really get Jerick McKinnon going out the backfield too much. But Isaiah Pacheco, what a performance for him. He looked fantastic in this game. And part of the reason we didn't have Mahomes go for high volume, the Jaguars, and then they ended up losing by a touchdown in the end. They really weren't in this game all that much. The Chiefs were in control for the most part. 12 rushes for 95 yards for Pacheco. Doesn't get the touchdown. That happened a lot in the regular season where Pacheco would be really effective in the power, but the scoring wouldn't be there. The 2 touchdowns went to Kelce. So at least you got the scores from Mahomes to Kelce here. So really, they played really good defense here, forced some key mistakes from Trevor Lawrence, especially in the second half, and didn't need a lot from their offense, and they moved on here. So you look at that score, you think it's going to be a lot more with the Chiefs explosion, but really it was Mahomes, Kelce, methodical work of this Jaguars defense. Kadarius Toney, we want him to get more touches. He had 6 touches for 50 yards in this game. He had one short catch where he just kind of dove and was strong in the red zone. He looked like Isaiah Pacheco on that with his physical running after the catch. But Kadarius Toney, he can be a player in this Chiefs offense. We did see Juju Smith-Schuster and Marquez Valdes-Scantling get limited to action in this game. So when you look at that overall for the Chiefs, I mean, it is really about Toney being a bigger part of what they want to do. But in terms of fantasy, he isn't producing. MVS did have that third touchdown there late from Mahomes to really put the game away. But really, you're looking at the situation where it it's pretty much been a compressed passing game for the Chiefs. And when they had Chad Henne come in there and he filled in for Mahomes at the end of the second quarter, 98-yard touchdown drive, a lot of driving with the running game and short passes to Kelce. So that's what the Chiefs offense is. It doesn't matter if it's Mahomes or Henne. They're not forcing the ball downfield when those shots are not available, and especially when Mahomes is a little bit hobbled with an ankle injury and can't buy time to extend plays to push the ball downfield. And they really adjusted well without Tyreek Hill. We'll see if it costs them here against the Bengals. Finally, a team that can score at a high level against them and match them versus what Mahomes can do against their defense. So something to watch there. But again, they've really managed well without Tyreek Hill to get back to this point of the AFC Championship game by diversifying and then kind of changing up their offense a little bit, spreading it out a little bit more. That's what Mahomes promised, and Mahomes has delivered, with Travis Kelce still being the centerpiece of the passing game. All right, let's go to the Jaguar side of things. This group of receivers for the Jaguars, look, it was tough for Trevor Lawrence. He couldn't get going here, but he ends up with a touchdown there to Christian Kirk. 14 targets for Kirk. He only ends up with 7 catches, 52 yards and a score, but he did come through as we expected. We also liked Zay Jones quite a bit in this game. He has 5 catches for 83 yards and 7 targets here. So Kirk and Jones are not going anywhere in this receiving core next year. I mean, we'll have to see what they do with Evan Ingram. He was signed on a 1-year prove-it deal. He did really play well. He was the third leading receiver behind these guys. And Marvin Jones, we think they'll move on from him, mainly because Calvin Ridley is coming back. So we'll see how it plays out. I think Zay Jones' value is going to be hurt a little bit. Ridley can also play the slot, so maybe a little bit more versatility for Kirk there. But I would expect Kirk and Ridley to be the key targets, but we also don't know how Ridley will respond, having a whole year off, suspended as a Falcon here while he was traded. So when we're looking at, again, Zay Jones came in nicely as a wide receiver 2-3 borderline. Kirk was a wide receiver 1 the whole way. Ingram ended up as a tight end 1. And Travis Etienne, what a good performance from him. 13 touches, 80 yards, and a TD. So they're getting him a little bit more involved in the pass game. I think he'll be an RB1 next year based on his usage as this centerpiece. And the full-time back here, James Robinson, cut into that early before he was traded to the Jets. So some things on the mend and change here, but I would expect Ingram to be back. I just expect Ingram and Zay Jones to see less work here, and Marvin Jones probably to be displaced with Ridley set to join the Jaguars for the 2023 season. And Kirk, I still think, will be at number 1. But this Jaguars passing game, a lot of upside. That makes Trevor Lawrence definitely going to be a top 6 pick, I think, with having at quarterback, I should say, with Ridley in the mix. So we'll just see how it plays out with these other receivers. Now, Eagles-Giants game wasn't much of a game, so we'll get into what happened with the Eagles. We did love Devonta Smith and Dallas Goedert. They both came through. 6 catches, 61 yards, and a touchdown for Smith on 10 targets. Dallas Goedert was very efficient, caught all 5 of those targets, 58 yards, and the first touchdown of the game from Jalen Hurts. So really, it was a game for those guys. They contained A.J. Brown, only 3 catches for 22 yards. He was a little bit frustrated, but then I think he understood in the end that he was playing a big part helping open up the offense for Smith and Goddard on the other side. He's been doing that a lot this season, but it's pick your poison. Some games it's Brown going off. Sometimes it's Smith and Goddard going off. So the Eagles just so versatile, it's going to leave someone out of the mix. And we've seen that all season long, where it can support 2 of the guys really having good fantasy games, but sometimes a third, whether it's Goddard, Smith, or Brown, gets left out. And here they didn't force the ball to Brown. They didn't need to. They pulled away here pretty easily, 38-7. So there's not a lot to push downfield versus Brown, and also this secondary for The Giants was a strength with the team healthy again, but they really were bad in the middle with the linebacker, so that opened things up for Goedert. Safety players pretty weak. Devonta Smith can also work the slot, so really lined up well for Smith and Goedert to produce here in this game. Jalen Hurts, a great game for him. 2 touchdowns there through the air, 1 on the ground. So usual Jalen Hurts performance. Didn't rush for a lot, but again, they didn't need him for a ton because not only was the passing game very efficient, the defense dominated, but their traditional running game was great. Miles Sanders, 17 carries, 90 yards. We'll see if this is it for Miles Sanders. He is a free agent coming up. Why I say that is Kenneth Gainwell going forward. 12 rushes. I know his last touchdown came in super garbage time when they're running out the clock, but he had a burst there against the Giants. The Giants kind of gave it up. But 12 rushes, 112 yards, and a touchdown. He also had 1 catch for 6 yards. So we'll see if they're just content with moving on from Sanders, saving some money, and rolling with Ken Gainwell next year. So we'll have to see how it plays out with Sanders in maybe 1 or 2 games left, potentially for the Eagles as their lead back here in 2022-23. Speaking of free agents, the other guy from Penn State in this game was Saquon Barkley. He's a free agent. The Giants say they want him back. It was not a very memorable playoff performance here, however. 9 rushes for 61. Pretty effective there when you look at overall yards per carry, but just couldn't get the volume as the negative game script developed here pretty quickly for the Giants. You also had a good game from Matt Breida off the bench, but garbage time he had to score. We also had a lot of struggles in the passing game as well. The leading receivers, Richie James, Isaiah Hodgins, Darius Slayton, Daniel Bellinger, all these guys disappeared. 7 catches on 10 targets for 51 yards for James led the team here. So rough outing overall. You had Daniel Jones take 5 sacks. He had an interception. It was his worst game in a long time, maybe the worst game of the season after coming off his 2 biggest games there. Colts, so that Week 17 game that clinched the playoff spot, and we had the divisional playoff lead up here, leading them over the Vikings with a dominant rushing and passing performance. But he crashed down to earth against his defense. Only 24 yards rushing, no TDs produced, was under pressure all game long. So Giants are going to have to figure out some things. Not only is Barkley a free agent, Daniel Jones, they got to figure out how much they want to pay him. They need some receiving help there because it's not going to get done with the likes of James and Slayton and Hodgins, especially when Kenny Golladay was a disappointment. They'd move on from Tony. Sterling Shepard is coming off a major injury. Wanda Robinson coming off injury. So I think they're going to have to address wide receiver, get some more opportunity there. I think they'd bring back Barkley and Jones, but it has to be at a combined right price here for Brian Daboll. Overall, good season for the Giants. Surprised us all. Became more fantasy relevant and more reality relevant. So good season for Daboll and the Giants. But again, they just ran into a team that was much better than their own division. They lost to the Eagles 3 times here in 2022-2023. All right, there you have a look at the Saturday games there. The Chiefs beating the Jaguars. The Eagles are really blowing out the Giants. We'll look at the Bengals-Bills matchup, as well as the 49ers-Cowboys result here in our next 2 segments here. We'll give the games their own segment each. They were just compelling with the big names there for you. We did tell you at the top of this episode of Locked On Fantasy Football is brought to you by PrizePicks, and it's a daily fantasy made easy at PrizePicks. We said that it was tough there in they say you call it week 20 for the divisional playoffs. Really, it's daily fantasy that you can get into with making entries in 60 seconds or less. You're just looking at the player projections, no competing against other players. It's just more or less in the price of projection. If your player does that, when you pick 2 to 6 players, you're good to go here, and you can win up to 10 times your money on an entry. You just have to score more or less than their price for projection. Again, no competing against other people, just you for the projections available. PrizePicks offers projection on any sport that you watch. That's not just the NFL, but we know NBA and NHL are in the middle of their season. College basketball is heating up toward March here. So a lot of good stuff there to check out on PrizePicks. It takes only a minute to put in your PrizePicks entries. Expect safe and fast withdrawals from PrizePicks, which is currently operational in more than 30 states and Canada. It's easy to get in on PrizePicks. Just download the PrizePicks app or go to PrizePicks.com to sign up to play daily fantasy sports. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with the promo code LOCKEDON. If you deposit $100, PrizePicks will give you $100. If you deposit $50, PrizePicks will give you $50. Don't forget to enter promo code LOCKEDON at sign up for instant deposit match up to $100. Okay, we'll continue the show here on Locked On Fantasy Football, looking at the takeaways from the divisional playoff games. We'll next tackle what we saw the Bengals-Bills result there on early Sunday afternoon. Thanks again for making Locked On Fantasy Football your first listen every day. Subscribe to Locked On NFL Podcast and get daily conversation with the biggest NFL stories, plus in-depth analysis on the biggest games, such as the divisional playoffs, the conference championship games, with key predictions for the NFL every Friday and Monday. That's today. Local insiders cover the weekend with game-to-game episodes. Big weekend for sure. Locked On NFL available on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. All right, let's look at this Bengals-Bills game. The Bengals 27-10. It was a domination here. Let's look at what they did at a winning cost here. Joe Burrow was solid, but he didn't have to go back and forth in a shootout with Josh Allen, which was surprising. 242 yards, yeah, we'll take that. 2 touchdowns, sure, and 31 yards rushing. So easy day at the office. Burrow dink and dunk, spread it around, be efficient, put the ball in the end zone to early Jamar Chase and Hayden Hurst. He didn't do anything else, but they didn't need him because they get pulled away, got the field goals, had a rushing touchdown late. The Bills were no contest in this game. So, again, we expected more volume. We expected a Burrow, Allen, and Nuts game here. We did not get it. It was very much one-sided with Cincinnati dominating this game offensively and defensively, 27-10. That was also good for Joe Mixon, the game script. Go figure. The Bills have good linebackers led by Matt Milano, the all-pro. They're pretty good against the run. What did the Bengals do with the backup offensive line with Jackson Carman filling in at left tackle for Jonah Williams? You got Max Sharping there playing for Alex Kappa at right guard. You had Hakeem Adeniji. He was the former starter. He had to play there for La'el Collins. What did they do? They just blew the Bills off the ball. And Mixon just dominated there with that run blocking. 20 carries, 105 yards on a TD that put the game away late for Joe Mixon. He also had 2 catches for 18. They involved Samaje Perine as well to help run out the clock late there. So the 33 yards rushing was involved a little bit. So that was not what we expected, where the game script would be so positive that Mixon and Perine in this Bengals rushing attack would really put up some big numbers here. So really great performance by Cincinnati. The offensive line controlled things. The Bills couldn't sniff Joe Burrow much. They got to him early for a sack, but that was about it. He escaped pretty well. He picked them apart at the back end, had plenty of time to throw, got rid of the ball quickly, and they ran it well. So love the way the Bengals produced offense, and this is why they're going to pick them against the Chiefs here, because, again, this Chiefs team should be very worried about the way the Bengals have played offense. They've also owned them in the Joe Burrow era, winning 3 games. So yeah, it's going to be a tough one for the Chiefs and their defense, the way that the Bengals picked apart the Bills' defense running and passing. Jamar Chase was the leader in that passing game, 5 catches, 61 yards, and a touchdown. That early nice play over the middle really should have been 2 touchdowns there. Just a little bit bobble there. Milano made a nice play to make sure it wasn't a completed catch back in the end zone, double coverage. It's a great throw by Joe Burrow, just couldn't hang on there and have complete control there. So it was ruled initially a touchdown, a second touchdown for Chase, but it ended up being a field goal made by Evan McPherson here. So Jamar Chase could have had a bigger game, but again, the Bengals didn't have to throw a ton here. How about Hayden Hurst? It was disappointing for T. Higgins. He only had 3 catches, 28 yards on 4 targets. He did draw a key pass interference penalty that helped the Bengals win the game. But again, Higgins was pretty quiet in this one. They didn't need to throw all that much, and we just saw Burrow take what was given there, and a lot of it was Hayden Hurst in the middle of the field. Hurst was fantastic in this game. He schemed himself open well. He got into the end zone. He had that hurdle for a key first down, so he was special. So they went out and got Hayden Hurst. He definitely was an upgrade over C.J. Uzomah with his athleticism and receiving ability here. So even if he gave him a little less in the blocking game, Hurst has been a key factor here, and it's really hurt the value of Tyler Boyd, but who cares? I mean, Hurst is key to the Bengals, what they needed here. So 559 and 1 on only 6 targets. So great game for Hayden Hurst in a winning cause here for the Bengals. It was really a great game for tight ends, really all of them. When you look at it, I mean, Evan Ingram was kind of quiet, but Travis Kelce went off. You had Hayden Hurst do his thing. And Dawson Knox was really the highlight of what the Bills were doing. He led the team with 5 catches, 65 yards, and 7 TDs. While that's good for Knox, it's really not good for the Bills if he's their leading receiver. Josh Allen, what a rough passing game. 265 yards, only was sacked once, but had an interception, no TDs. He does get a touchdown on the ground, but only 26 yards rushing. So they contained him through the air. They contained him on the ground. I mean, when does Josh Allen kind of game typically where he's held under 300 yards passing and 30 yards rushing. It's very hard. Josh Allen didn't play well. He went high risk, high reward. It was kind of the anti-Joe Burrow, looking for the big plays that weren't always there downfield. It was pretty bad to watch. I mean, he missed on a few connections. They had a few drops. But again, it was snowy out there. It was cold. It was hard to make those catches, and the Bengals had a few of those. But they went for more of the high percentage throw, spraying the ball around there, while the Bills were intent on throwing the ball downfield. They abandoned the running game pretty early here. So Dawson Knox, they got involved quite a bit late. I mean, it was interesting. They had Isaiah McKenzie and Cole Beasley as part of the game plan early on the shorter passes, and they just disappeared from the game plan altogether as Josh Allen went back to flinging it downfield. Eventually, they adjusted with Dawson Knox and dumping off to Singletary in garbage time, but that was not enough there. So let's look at the rest of this offense. Khalil Shakir, I think, is going to be a player as a third target here. Isaiah McKenzie, Cole Beasley, we talk about them, but come on. These guys are limited. I think Shakir is a special playmaker, and I think he's a guy that could actually get more run, maybe as the number 2 target behind Stephon Diggs, the way Gabe Davis was a bit disappointing as it's kind of a shot play guy this year. So they called him big play, big game Gabe. Well, he didn't come through at all. Shakir was the second leading receiver, caught both of his targets for 40 yards. So I thought they could have involved him a little bit more if they weren't going to use McKenzie and Beasley, but didn't happen. So watch out for Shakir having a bigger role, especially if Davis fades a little bit. And we expect McKenzie and Beasley not to come back here. For Buffalo, Stephon Diggs was very frustrated with Allen there. Well, I know why, because he had 10 targets, only 4 catches, 35 yards as the number 1 receiver. So Stephon Diggs really disappointed in fantasy and reality here. So really bad game for Diggs. So we'll see what they do there. They needed some consistent help. The Bengals did a great job of taking him out of the game. Gabe Davis, again, 2 catches, 34 yards on 4 targets. Not a lot there. Much more efficiency from Shakir. So we'll see how it goes. But Knox is definitely doctoring himself as a key target here. He had the touchdown streak as the leading receiver. So I think he's really the number 2. We'll see how it plays out between Shakir and Davis in the offseason. But it's going to be an interesting battle. So we all went for the Davis splash with those 4 touchdowns against the Chiefs in this round. But really, Shakir might have a little bit more substance here going forward because he's a little versatile, can play inside or outside, so something to watch there. Devin Singletary is another running back who's a free agent. 6 carries, 24 yards. That was pretty ineffective. Also had 5 catches, 38 yards on 8 targets. They dumped off to him a lot when the game was already sealed up for the Bengals, so that kind of was garbage production, but still not a lot there. We look at 11 touches for 62 yards. But the head scratcher was James Cook. I don't know why they didn't involve him more in the passing game or just really in the running game in general. Only 5 carries for 13 yards. So Cook was phased out of the game plan by the Bills, a little bit by the game script as well. So we'll see how it plays out. But definitely James Cook is in a great position here with Singletary heading into free agency. We'll see if the Bills make it a priority to get a Jahmyr Gibbs or a Bijan Robinson late in the first round to kind of have that back to complement James Cook, who's a more receiving change of pace back. So we'll see what they do with Singletary. But I'd expect they'll only bring back Singletary if it's a reasonable, pretty cheap deal here because there's nothing special about his game. They moved on from Zach Moss. I think they can easily move on from Singletary. As Naeem Hines probably stays on this team for special teams. Cook being the primary receiving, change of pace, explosive back. So I could see them easily going getting that power back. Maybe it's Gibbs in the draft or someone else becomes available. We'll see how it happens here. Maybe it's Ezekiel Elliott. We'll talk more about the Cowboys and their backfield in our final segment here on Locked On Fantasy Football, as well as the winning 49ers in that final game, the NFC Divisional Playoffs that capped the weekend. We'll get into our final segment on Locked On Fantasy Football. Well, I have some really exciting news. The NFL playoffs are here with 3 more games left, the conference championship games and the Super Bowl. And I've got to say, I'm really excited about our new sports betting partner for Locked On because they're the number 1 sports book in America. It is FanDuel. And if you're new to FanDuel, that's even better. They have so many great features that make betting on sports fun and easy. New customers join today and get started with $150 in free bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. Just sign up at FanDuel.com/lockedon. It is great to be on board with FanDuel. They're easy to work with them. You can check them out there. There's a promo code there on your screen if you're watching the show on YouTube. But FanDuel, again, I'm really excited about this. It's great that they're part of the Locked On Network and Locked On Fantasy Football. You can Check out all your favorite bets from the money line to point spreads to player props at FanDuel. Plus, you can even combine your bets for a chance at a bigger payout with the same game parlay. Those are always exciting to play. So, FanDuel, it is going to be fun. So, we'll get into some FanDuel bets there. We talked FanDuel cash games in DFS. Well, we'll get into some FanDuel bets this week as we get in later in the week that we like here. We'll set up some as part of our Friday show, Lineup Friday, talking betting and DFS. We'll incorporate FanDuel into that. So we're excited to do that. It's all on an app that's safe, secure, and super easy to use. So football fans, don't miss out. Place your first $5 bet to get $150 in free bets, win or lose, at FanDuel.com/locked-on. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sportsbook partner of the NFL, and now our partner here at Locked On and Locked On Fantasy Football. All right, it is time to close the show looking at the 49ers-Cowboys result. We'll start with the winning 49ers. 19-12 is the final. That's not good for fantasy football, and really hit the under. There's no question about that. I thought this game was definitely going to go over with these two teams, but the defenses prevailed. It was a grindy type game. Mistakes were made. Points were left on the board in the red zone. So you look at Brock Purdy, 214-0. We didn't expect this. I mean, he's been Mr. Clutch, right? 2 touchdowns at least in every start he's made, 2 or 3 scores. He ends up with 0 here. So credit the Cowboys. They contained this 49ers offense and this passing game pretty well here. But Purdy was still efficient. He didn't turn over the ball. Just didn't get any scores there. And the story of this game is George Kittle, 5 catches, 95 yards, caught all of his targets, including a pass from Purdy where he bought time. Kittle kind of opened up the middle. What happened? Kittle got one hand on it, let it deflect a little bit off his helmet. He comes down with it. That was the play of the game there that set up the 49ers touchdown drive, which was closed out by Christian McCaffrey. Not a big game for McCaffrey. 10 catches, 35 yards in that score. He also had 6 catches, 22 yards on 8 targets. So they contained him as well, 57 yards and a touchdown in a game like this at 19-12. You'll take that from McCaffrey, as well as a 5 for 95 line for Kittle when not much was going on there. So really, 49ers controlled this game for the most part, but settled for field goals there. We know Robbie Gould was pretty busy in this game for sure. And again, if those opportunities, a couple of those turned into touchdowns, you were looking at a really fine performance from the 49ers. But you'll just have to settle for Kittle and McCaffrey coming through here, and that's what they did. Elijah Mitchell ran pretty well. McCaffrey got a little bit banged up. We'll see if he was effective there late in the game, but he was able to come back late when they were trying to run on the clock. Elijah Mitchell, 14 carries, 51 yards. He kind of kept the Cowboys in it late by running out of bounds when he shouldn't have, but he still looked very effective. When you run for those yards, a tough Cowboys defense, grinding through it, he had some nice bursts there, filling in for McCaffrey at times. So Mitchell definitely is involved as their closer a little bit there, and McCaffrey was a little bit banged up, but I think he'll be totally fine here for the championship game against the Eagles. Deebo Samuel, they also contained him pretty well, and you figure that with the linebackers playing a key part of here, Leighton Vander Esch and Micah Parsons. They're on the second level, being part of it, as well as Jaron Hurst at safety. 4 rushes, 11 yards for Deebo, so not much there. 4 catches for 45 yards on 7 targets. So wasn't a Deebo game. After last week was a Deebo game. So it was more of a Kittle CMC game this week. And Brandon Ayuk wasn't needed much. He moved the chains early on a key drive to set up a field goal. 2 catches, 28 yards, and 4 targets. So credit the Cowboys pass defense, the pass rush. They got a couple sacks and pretty early, contained the downfield passing game. But overall, the 49ers still came through with 2 of their principals, Kittle and McCaffrey, doing just fine, as well as their defense making some big plays against Dak Prescott there. So Tony Pollard, we said we're going to talk about the Cowboys backfield. This could be his last game, and he fractured his left fibula. It was first reported to be a high ankle sprain. He had to exit. Before he did, he had 6 rushes for 22 yards and 2 catches for 11. So he wasn't doing all that much. The 49ers run defense, we knew it was nasty, but I thought they could get Tony Pollard a little bit more involved in the passing game. That opportunity did not happen once he had to exit the game. And now it looks like he has a broken bone that it's going to take 2 or 3 months to heal here. So that is not good because Tony Pollard is heading to free agency. We know that begins in a couple months in March. So he's not going to be healed up, and he's going to have to convince teams and the Cowboys there that he's good to go. So does he come back to the Cowboys in a discount deal, knowing the injury? Do other teams stay away from him? Is free agency closed here? We'll have to see with Pollard here. But again, I think the Cowboys would like him back. They maybe want to get out of Ezekiel Elliott's contract. So Elliott could be on the move here. 10 rushes for 26 yards in this game. So not a lot behind Pollard. We knew the power running game was going to struggle. So we'll see what they do. Again, Pollard is straight up a free agent now, having a considerable injury. Elliott is a little bit older, definitely slowed down this year. And the Cowboys could save some significant cap money if they got out of his contract, which they can do this year. So something to look at in the backfield. But the story here was Dak Prescott. He just was not very good in this one. 206 yards, one TD early. We thought he was going to roll. He had that one pass to Dalton Schultz on the drive that looked fantastic, but a lot of mistakes here. 2 interceptions included, and 4 rushes for 22 yards. Didn't make up for it like he did last week. So cools off completely here after ripping the Buccaneers. He just couldn't get anything going against the 49ers. Was fortunate to get that early touchdown. Otherwise, it would have been a nightmare of a game. But down the last drive, Dak was just struggling. I mean, just putting the ball up. Part of it is 49ers were playing lights out here. Fred Warner at linebacker was outstanding. The secondary was playing well. The pass rush was getting after Dak. So Dak was under duress in a tough spot. Not making excuses for Dak, but high degree of difficulty. He did not come through while Purdy was able to do that. So Dak, we'll see. He's got the big contract. We've got to see a little bit more from him. Speaking of Dalton Schultz, 5 catches at 27 yards, only 1 TD there. That I thought he was going to have another big game after he lit up the Buccaneers after he scored early, but 10 targets for him. So Dalton Schultz could be on the move. He played on the franchise tag this year, but they also have Jake Ferguson, who they like out of Wisconsin, as well as Peyton Hendershot, who made some plays at tight end. So very good chance the Cowboys move on from Schultz, more so if they want to keep Pollard and Elliott around on their team. Now, CeeDee Lamb, you can't fault him. He did his thing here, 10 catches, 117 yards on 13 targets. He got a little bit banged up, played through that. He also had 2 rushes for 6 yards to try to help to spark something with Pollard out. It did not happen in this game. But CeeDee Lamb, big year for him. He was the standout Cowboy, most reliable Cowboy all year long. He felt it with the Cooper Rush. He felt it with Prescott. He's going to be back. He's going to be the alpha here. Now, he could use a little bit of help because Michael Gallup didn't do enough here. No Brown. So, again, they need more from Gallup. We'll see if they use Jalen Tolbert a little bit more next year. But really, the Cowboys' really downfall here was not getting that third target going behind Lamb and Schultz. And now Schultz will probably move on. The running game might have a different look without Pollard and or Elliott here. So a lot of things to watch out for with Jerry Jones in this offseason here. But another disappointment for Mike McCarthy's crew at the hands of the 49ers in the playoffs. All right, there you have it. There's a breakdown of what we saw, the takeaways, most important things to know from the divisional playoff results in terms of fantasy football. Again, we'll get to our news and notes there. So we'll go around the league. A lot of changes happening, coordinators being dismissed, some decisions being made, some quarterbacks potentially being changed, some draft and free agency thoughts occurring for some of these teams. So we'll look at the rumors, news notes that you need to know that are coming out. So I love doing that show because, again, we look more at the big picture, and a lot of things quickly changed here. And teams still looking to hire their new coaches in all those situations. So a lot of good stuff. We'll catch you up there on what's going on Tuesday and Wednesday show. We'll look at the AFC and NFC. There we'll break down each conference, all 16 teams. Then we'll get into the matchups of the conference championship games. Again, congratulations. It's going to be Chiefs, Bengals, and the 49ers, Eagles. So looking forward to those matchups for sure. And we'll get into those into a deep dive, breaking out each game individually, plus DFS there for you at the end of the week. Thanks again for making Locked On Fantasy Football your first listen today. For your second listen, check out the Locked On NFL podcast, bringing you the local insights you love to the national spotlight. Daily conversation on the biggest NFL stories, including the playoffs and coaching, hiring searches. Locked On NFL, available on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. For Locked On Fantasy Football, this has been Vinnie Iyer. Have a great rest of your Monday, and we'll check you out there looking at news and notes starting on Tuesday.